Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into a place so hot, so dry, and so beautifully brutal that your phone would melt before you could take a selfie. Imagine a land where the ground cracks open with fire, the air feels like a blow dryer turned on high, and water is more precious than gold. Welcome to the Danakil Depression, often called the hottest inhabited place on Earth. Now, you probably won't survive this. Not without years of practice, calloused feet, and a camel or two. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your current location and the time where you are. I'd love to know who's falling asleep with me from the chill of Norway or the swelter of Singapore. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive barefoot, dust clinging to your skin, the heat pressing in like a heavy, invisible blanket. It's not even noon, and the temperature is already brushing 47 degrees Celsius, 117 in American. The sky is an empty pale dome, the horizon shimmering in false puddles. There's no forest, no breeze, no place for a mosquito to hide, let alone a human. But there are people here, always have been. You squint through the heat haze and spot a figure in the distance, small, cloaked in a white wrap, her shadow stretching sharp across the cracked salt crust. She's carrying a jerry can, of water, you hope. Of fuel, maybe. Of secrets, definitely. This is the Danakil Depression, tucked into the Horn of East Africa, spanning parts of Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. A place where tectonic plates are literally pulling the earth apart, where lava boils up like soup from the deep, and sulfur geysers decorate the landscape in sickly yellows and neon greens. It's geologically alive and very much awake. In fact, this region lies at the junction of three tectonic plates, the African, Arabian, and Somali. Scientists call it a triple junction, but you might call it nature's pressure cooker. Over time, this tectonic tension has ripped open the land, lowered its surface far below sea level, and invited the sun to take full control. You look around and realize this is not a place humans should be. And yet, the Afar people have been here for centuries, not just existing, but adapting, enduring, even thriving in ways modern science still tries to comprehend. You take a step forward and feel the heat rising from the ground, as if you're walking over a sleeping dragon. Your soles ache. You breathe in, and your throat dries on contact. There's something slightly sour in the air, a cocktail of minerals, dust, and time. A lizard dashes past your foot, making more sense here than you ever will. Somewhere in the near distance, you hear the groan of a camel caravan. That sound, that slow, dragging shuffle of hooves, has echoed here for centuries. But don't let the silence fool you. This place hums with invisible stories. The way the salt flats crack in polygon patterns that no artist could reproduce. The way the sulfur pools bubble like some unholy cauldron. The way the wind, when it comes, doesn't cool, it scours. Scientists still argue about how people first came to live here. Was it necessity? Climate migration? A test of divine patience? Whatever the reason, humans found a way. And here's the first big truth you'll need to accept. Comfort was never part of the equation. The rules of survival here are about endurance, not ease. Water is never guaranteed. Shade is handmade. And food, Well, let's just say you won't find a salad bar. In the Danakil, every choice is tactical. Want to move a mile across the salt plain? You better do it at dawn. Want to eat something fresh? Better ferment it first. Want to complain about the heat? Tough luck. No one's listening. And yet, in this unforgiving setting, culture blossomed. Language, song, trade, all carried forward through generations under the hammering sun. You sit now on a rocky ledge, watching the horizon ripple. Far off, there's a low mountain. Not tall enough to be dramatic, but high enough to offer a sliver of elevation. You can't help wondering if that's where people go to cool off. Spoiler, it's not. The air is just as hot up there. But up close, the details start to paint a different picture. A well dug by hand, a stone wall curving around a camp, a goat tethered in the shade of its own shadow, signs that this heat hasn't won yet. You hear voices, not panicked, not desperate, just ordinary talk in the Afar language. It's fast and clipped, full of subtle inflection. They're probably discussing salt loads, or camel behavior, or that weird foreigner who's melting by the rocks. That's you, by the way. And right now, you're learning the first secret of desert survival. Stop moving. Seriously, sit. Let your sweat do its job. Stop resisting the heat and let it slow you down. Time moves differently here. It doesn't gallop. It crawls. You realize that if you want to make it through this place, you'll have to think like the locals. Practical, resourceful, and patient enough to wait out the sun. And as the heat continues to build, pressing down like a jealous god, you begin to grasp something deeper. That survival here isn't about resisting the land. It's about making peace with it. The salt cracks beneath you. The air wobbles like jelly. And a bird, tiny, feathered, ridiculous, flutters overhead, surviving despite everything. You close your eyes for a second. And when you open them, the journey has only just begun. The sun climbs higher, though you'd swear it had already reached its limit. But no, it still has room to burn. The air begins to shimmer violently now, the horizon folding like a mirage over and over again. It's almost beautiful, if you weren't actively cooking. Now that you're seated, sticky and dazed, it's time to answer the big question. Why is it so hot here anyway? The Danakil Depression isn't just hot in the way a summer sidewalk burns your feet. It's persistently, ruthlessly, scientifically hot. Temperatures regularly soar above 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And unlike a desert that cools off at night, this place holds its heat like a grudge. Think of it as Earth's sauna, except no one is relaxing. So what makes it this way? Start with the altitude, or lack of it. The Danakil Depression sits around 125 meters below sea level, one of the lowest places on the planet. And because hot air sinks and sunlight reflects off the salt flats with ruthless intensity, heat just piles on top of itself. Next, there's almost no cloud cover. Nothing shields you from the sun's direct gaze. There's no tree line, no moisture to absorb radiation, and barely a whisper of wind to shuffle things around. It's like standing under a magnifying glass. Forever. Add to that the fact that it's sitting on top of active rift zones. That's right. This isn't just a crusty plain. It's a geological wound where three tectonic plates are tearing away from each other. The earth is literally breaking open beneath your feet. And in some places, molten rock is just chilling a few feet below the surface. Well, not chilling, You get the idea. Volcanoes like Erta Ale bubble with lava 24/7, like the planet's slow, angry heartbeat. Beneath your soles, magma chambers bubble and shift, heating the earth from below. You're standing in the mouth of the oven, not just in front of it. In the soil, it's not even soil. It's salt, rock, and mineral sediment so dry it could steal the moisture from your thoughts. The white salt flats reflect sunlight back upward, doubling the radiation you absorb. A sunburn here isn't just a possibility, it's a rite of passage. Scientists still argue about whether the Danakil is the hottest place on Earth year-round, or just during certain months. Some say Iran's Lut Desert takes the crown. Others throw in Death Valley, California, or Kuwait on a particularly cranky afternoon. But the Danakil remains the gold standard for relentless, deadly heat, where humans somehow still persist. And here's something to chew on. Studies suggest that the surface temperatures here have reached 70.7 degrees Celsius, 159 degrees Fahrenheit at times. That's enough to fry an egg, boil your flip-flops, and dissolve your sense of optimism. Ironically, it's not the air itself that reaches those numbers, but the ground. Still, if you lie on it, you'll feel every degree. As you start to notice these things, the shine of the salt, the tension of the land, the visible convection in the air, you begin to understand that survival here isn't just about hydration. It's about intimate cooperation with the terrain. The Afar people didn't move here by mistake. They settled with purpose and knowledge passed down like Holy Scripture. They knew when the heat would peak, when the winds might shift, and how to orient a tent to make it feel like a slight breeze is mercy from above. And here's a quirky tidbit. Despite the terrain's hostility, some species love it here. Microbial life thrives in the bubbling sulfur pools. Pink and yellow algae bloom in briny water so toxic it could strip paint. Some scientists believe these extreme environments might be analogs for what life on Mars could look like. Yep, this place is that alien. In fact, NASA researchers and planetary geologists often visit the Danakil to simulate extraterrestrial conditions. You might be sweating through your shirt, but somewhere, a guy in a white lab coat is grinning because these ponds mimic ancient Martian lakes. Just don't drink from them, or touch them, or fall in. Really, just observe quietly. The terrain here doesn't change quickly, but it does change. Over millennia, the depression was once flooded by the Red Sea. When the water receded, it left behind layers upon layers of salt, some deposits up to 800 meters thick. That salt became not just scenery, but currency. But we'll get to that. Right now, you're learning that this hellscape is not a fluke. It's a consequence of altitude, geology, chemistry, and heat physics all playing a very aggressive game of poker with human biology. Even the wind is deceptive. Occasionally, a breeze will roll through, and you'll want to cry tears of joy. But the second it touches you, you realize it's hot. Hot wind, like someone just opened an oven door directly into your face. No relief, just insult. And yet, you can't help but admire the stillness. This kind of silence doesn't exist in cities. No engines, no chatter. Just the constant soft crackle of salt contracting under the sun. Even the camels seem to walk quieter here. Afar guides will sometimes stop and stand still in the worst of the heat. Their bodies completely relaxed, as if their hearts slow to match the landscape. You try it. You stand tall, arms at your sides, and pretend not to panic. Your shadow feels sharp. like a knife traced on the ground. You squint at the rocks around you, volcanic rubble, mixed with sharp, crunchy salt formations. There's beauty in it, in a jagged, apocalyptic way. This isn't the end of the world. It's the part just before. You take a deep breath, and even that feels deliberate. You're not here to fight the heat. You're here to understand how people stopped fighting it and started surviving it instead. The heat presses in tighter. The land whispers through cracks and winds. And you, a tiny figure against an endless plain, begin to appreciate how powerful it is that anyone ever dared call this place home. You wake from a heat-dazed trance to find your tongue stuck to the roof of your mouth. Not in a metaphorical, I'm nervous kind of way, but in the real, terrifying sense that your body is drying from the inside out. Welcome to the Danakil's most pressing issue, thirst. Here, water isn't just scarce, it's mythological. There are no rivers, no glacial runoff, no misty springs babbling away in secret corners. The rainfall is laughable, if it comes at all. On average, the Danakil receives less than 100 mm of rain per year. That's about as much as a single thunderstorm would dump in a lush place like Oregon. Here, it just doesn't. So how exactly did anyone quench their thirst? With creativity, grit, and an intimate relationship with salt. You blink, eyes adjusting to the blinding glare of the flats. You're standing on a vast white crust, crunchy underfoot, stretching for miles in every direction, like the surface of a badly rendered video game. It's not snow, it's salt. Pure, ancient, sun-baked salt. Long ago, when the Red Sea flooded this region and later receded, it left behind not just a salty memory, but entire geological layers of the stuff. And those salty deposits became both a burden and a blessing. It turns out, salt can trap water, not in handy bottles or bubbling streams, but as brine, concentrated mineral-rich pools just beneath the surface. These aren't lakes you'd want to swim in, or touch, or sneeze near. But ancient Afar communities found ways to extract small quantities of usable water from brine using clever filtration techniques. One method involved gathering salt-encrusted plants and slowly heating them, coaxing water vapor into makeshift traps where it could condense into a few sacred drops. It wasn't much. But when you're baking under an African sun, not much is still survival. Another trick? Dew. Early mornings, very early, can sometimes coax condensation out of the night's cooler air. Locals would stretch fabric across wooden frames and let tiny droplets collect on the underside. It's the kind of patience that modern life barely remembers. Then there's the camel bladder technique. It sounds gross because it is, but it worked. Water, carried in animal bladders or stomachs, was less prone to evaporation and could be sealed with surprisingly little loss. You wouldn't sip from it like a chilled thermos, of course, but you'd be alive. And don't forget the jerrycans. Modern Afar nomads might still walk miles for water, but now they do it with bright yellow jugs, lugging 20 liters on their backs, sometimes through literal hellfire temperatures. And no, they don't complain. Not because they love it, but because what would be the point? Scientists still argue about whether the region's ancient water collection strategies were borrowed from neighboring oases or developed independently. Given the isolation of the Danakil and its uniquely brutal terrain, there's a strong case for homegrown innovation. Nobody else had to deal with a place quite like this. And while we're at it, let's talk about the salt trade. You see, this shimmering white wasteland isn't just scenery. For centuries, it was currency. Blocks of salt, called a mole, were carved by hand, packed onto camel caravans, and traded across Ethiopia. Even in the age of credit cards and cryptocurrencies, some locals still consider salt slabs a form of wealth. But harvesting salt here isn't some gentle spa day activity. You kneel in the heat, you chisel with crude tools, you sweat a lot. Then you bind the blocks with rope, load them onto a howling, groaning camel, and walk them out across the horizon, hopefully before your toes catch fire. Every step is a gamble. Every drop of sweat an investment. You stop for a moment and look down. The salt crystals at your feet are geometric and sharp, like nature's attempt at origami. They glisten with a deceptive coolness, little ice-like shards that hold no mercy. You reach down and touch one. It's dry, bone dry, and warm, like it's been sunbathing since the dinosaurs quit. Nearby, a cluster of Afar workers are loading salt slabs with a kind of practiced choreography. No talking, no jokes, just work, sun, and the slow, rhythmic grunt of leather against skin. One of them, barefoot of course, glances at you and gives a slight nod, not exactly friendly, but not hostile either. Just acknowledgement. You're a visitor, a tourist, a foreigner in the truest sense of the word. You don't belong here, not really, but you're being tolerated. For now. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. The sweat of salt workers often leaves crystalline patterns on their skin, like tattoos made from pain and labor. The longer they've been out, the more detailed the map. There's a kind of beauty in it, though it's hard to appreciate when your brain is actively begging for electrolytes. You reach for your canteen, imaginary or otherwise, and realize something else. It's not just the sun that drains you. It's the silence, the stillness, the unending sameness of the terrain. Your body adapts by slowing everything down. Movements become deliberate. Thoughts arrive one at a time. There's no multitasking in the Danakil. You drink water when you have it. You conserve sweat by sitting still. And when you walk with purpose, or not at all. Afar, children learn this from the time they can stand. No frantic chasing, no unnecessary running. Even playtime is a gentle affair. Quiet games, small movements, shadows used as toys, because running under this sun is like challenging a volcano to a dance-off. You're not going to win. And yet, they survive. More than that, they know joy here. Songs rise from tents at dusk. Laughter echoes during salt breaks. And weddings, when they happen, stretch late into the evening, when the heat finally backs down enough for dancing. You sit again, panting lightly. The salt stings your nose. You catch the faint smell of goats and sun-baked skin. A breeze picks up, but it feels like someone just opened an oven door. Still, it moves the air. And that's enough. Your lips crack slightly. You remember the Afar trick, rubbing camel milk over the skin to prevent chapping. Weird? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. You wipe your brow and gaze at the endless flats, the shimmering salt crusts, the distant black outlines of camel trains cutting through the white. You're beginning to understand what kind of person lives here. The kind who makes water out of nothing. The kind who doesn't panic when their throat dries. The kind who knows exactly how long they can go without shade and exactly where to find it. And as the sun reaches its zenith and the world turns blinding white, you realize something. Thirst here isn't a problem, it's a daily puzzle, and solving it is a way of life. You're learning now, slowly, sweatily, that the sun here isn't just a presence, it's a predator. And the hours between noon and late afternoon, that's when it hunts hardest. There's a moment around midday when everything seems to stop. The camels halt, the wind dies, even the salt seems to fold in on itself. And that's not poetic license, it's survival strategy. Because when the heat peaks, nothing moves unless it absolutely has to. This is the hour of the shade makers. But in a land with no trees and no buildings, how do you find shade? Easy answer. You build it from whatever you can. Some shelters here look more like optical illusions than real structures. You approach a camp and squint at what seems to be a pile of rocks until someone steps out from under it, perfectly calm and somehow not melting. That's your first introduction to Afar ingenuity. Afar, shelters, or airy, are often low to the ground. Their roofs made of woven mats or animal hides stretched over thin wooden frames. The materials are ultralight, mobile, and designed for easy assembly and disassembly. Nomads don't have time for heavy bricks or tiled roofs. They carry their homes like snails, quick to pitch, quick to pack. Many use domed frames made from acacia branches, some of the few hardy trees that dot this landscape. These frames are covered with layers of palm matting, goat hide, or even woven fabric patched together from older shelters. The key isn't thickness, it's breathability. You don't want to trap heat. You want to trick it into rising and leaving. Inside, you find cool darkness. Not cold, nothing's cold here, but dramatically less scorching. The kind of space where your brain can stop panicking and your eyes can stop squinting. It smells like sweat, dust, and firewood. And that's a good thing. And when no shelter is nearby, you make shade the old-fashioned way, with your own shadow. People here learn how to squat in ways that minimize surface contact with the ground. You see a man curled into what looks like a collapsed origami crane, barely touching the earth, conserving sweat like it's banked gold. Sometimes, herders arrange their goats in strategic clusters, not just to keep the animals cool, but to create a shaded pocket underneath their bellies. It's a move that's half pastoral and half genius. The goats don't seem to mind either. Everyone's in this together. And then there's the rock trick. In some places, Afar families build low, semicircular rock walls, no taller than your knee. Not for privacy, not for defense, just to cast a consistent shadow, big enough for one person to curl behind during the worst of the heat. It's not much. But in the Danakil, not much is still victory. Scientists still argue about whether these minimalist shelters represent adaptations from older Cushitic traditions or developed independently due to the extreme climate. Either way, the result is the same. Homes that breathe, that move, and that respect the tyranny of the sun. Here's your quirky fact for today. Some shelters were historically topped with goat dung. Yes, really, because it acted as a surprisingly decent insulator once dried. Smelly? Sure. But out here, comfort smells like whatever works. There's a rhythm to daily life that's dictated entirely by shade. Mornings are for movement. Late evenings are for celebration. And the hours in between, those are sacred rest time. Children are taught early on how to stay still during these hours. You watch a group of them curled under a single mat, playing quietly with bones and beads. Not a shout among them. They know the rules. If you move too much, you lose water. If you lose water, well, no one wants to play that game. You step into one of the low-slung shelters and immediately feel your body sigh. The air is still, but it's darker, less harsh. Someone hands you a small cup of camel milk, lukewarm, frothy, oddly comforting. You sip. It's salty, slightly sour, and tastes like everything in this desert. Functional first, delicious second. The inside of the shelter is simple. A few mats, a carved wooden headrest, some tools hanging neatly from nails hammered into split branches. A family's entire existence reduced to a space smaller than a garden shed. But it works. The matron of the household, dressed in layered cotton wraps, fans herself slowly with a strip of woven reed. She glances at you, expression neutral, then offers you a place to sit. You do. The ground is warm but not punishing. She begins stacking coals in a small clay stove, preparing something for the evening. The process is slow, intentionally slow, because everything here is done with the long game in mind. You can't sprint through life in the Danakil. You drop by mile 1. And here's something beautiful. Despite the minimalism, people decorate. Inside shelters, you'll find bright patterns painted onto mats, necklaces strung from shells or bottle caps, mirrors, beads, even tiny portraits torn from magazines. Life finds space for beauty, even here. You notice a leather pouch near the door. It holds incense, fragrant resins burned at sunset to cleanse the shelter of evil spirits, and perhaps more effectively, flies. The smoke curls upward, softening the air, masking the sweat. From outside, you hear the low hum of wind picking up, a gentle breeze skimming across the salt. It rustles the shelter's edge and brings with it the scent of ash and goats. Outside, the sun begins its slow descent. Shadows lengthen, and with them, life begins to stretch and stir again. Camels grunt, children yawn and uncurl. Someone claps twice, maybe a signal, or maybe just defiance against the silence. You step back outside, and the world feels survivable again. That's the lesson the shade teaches. Not just how to hide from the sun, but when and how to listen. Because if you know how to wait it out, the heat always relents. Eventually, the heat has dipped just enough to make movement tolerable. Not comfortable, never that, but bearable in the way a sauna might feel, if the sauna were trying to kill you. You rise, joints crackling like dry twigs, and follow the sound that's been tugging at the edge of your hearing for hours. The soft clop of hooves across the salt. Camels. They appear like a mirage, long-legged silhouettes trailing slowly across the flats, each beast burdened with slabs of salt and led by a lean figure wrapped in a white shama. This is no tourist parade. This is the ancient trade route of the Afar salt caravans, and it's been marching for centuries. The camels don't complain, neither do the men. Every movement is deliberate, worn smooth by repetition. You watch them pass, awed not just by the endurance on display, but by the sheer practicality of it. Camels are survival royalty in this region. Their wide, padded feet keep them from sinking into soft salt crusts. Their nostrils can close against blowing dust, and their body temperatures can swing wildly without harm, saving precious water. If humans are stubborn, camels are divine. But what's more impressive than the animals are their feet, or rather, the human ones. Because here's the kicker. Many Afar salt miners and traders walk barefoot across these brutal landscapes. No boots, no sandals, just calloused soles and quiet resolve. Scientists still argue about the physiological limits of barefoot endurance in extreme terrain, and the Afar are often referenced in studies of pain tolerance and foot adaptation. How do their feet not burn? Well, they sometimes do. But over time, those feet harden into tools, thick, leather tough, and oddly agile. The desert becomes an extension of the body. You pause and kneel, pressing your palm to the salt-crusted earth. Hot, but survivable. Bare feet walk this daily, over 30, 40, even 50 kilometers at a time, dragging camels loaded with salt that weighs more than optimism. This salt isn't just for show. Each slab, neatly cut by hand with crude axes and bound in stacks, is destined for market towns far to the west. Even in the age of highways and refrigeration, these bricks are valuable. There's something sacred in salt carved by hand, harvested with sweat, and carried by beasts that have learned not to question the sun. Along the route, makeshift camps dot the horizon, temporary rest stops marked by low stone walls, tethered camels, and smoke rising from cooking fires. You join one now, the caravan settling in after a long day's march. The men move slowly, but not sluggishly. They unpack their gear, scrape the salt from the camels' backs, and begin preparing food. You sit with them, offering what little help you can. A young man, maybe 16, chuckles when you fumble a rope knot. He fixes it in one flick of his wrist, then hands you a slice of dried meat. It's tough, salty, of course, and tastes vaguely like desperation. But it fills your stomach and doesn't demand a lot of water to digest. Clever, that. As twilight cools the air, the men stretch out on mats laid over bare rock. Their feet, cracked, thick, scarred, seem like ancient tools passed down through generations. You ask one elder if it hurts. He smiles a toothy grin and says something short. Someone translates, "Only at first. Then the earth knows you." Here's a quirky tidbit for your growing file. Some Afar traders rub camel dung on their feet before setting out, not for luck, but to protect against burning salt and infections. It's a crude barrier, but it works. Even the bacteria seem to think twice before messing with dung-smeared toes. You lean back and look up. Stars are beginning to blink through the lavender dusk. The heat still radiates from the ground, but it's finally releasing its grip. And as darkness stretches across the flats, the true rhythm of the caravan reveals itself. Travel by day, rest by night. March until you can't, then keep marching. Even the camels have adapted to this. They kneel patiently, resting their loads on custom-carved wooden saddles designed to keep the salt slabs from digging into their flanks. One even sighs loudly, as if mocking your soft hands and sore thighs. The trade itself is organized but flexible. Caravans are led by experienced elders who know every landmark, every seasonal change in the wind, every place where a pool of brine might poison a goat. They track time with the stars, not watches. They measure distance in footsteps, not kilometers. And here's a mainstream geographical fact you can tuck under your pillow tonight. The Danakil Depression sits near one of the lowest points on Earth, not covered by water, and its terrain stretches toward the Afar Triangle, one of the most geologically active areas on the planet. A rift valley in motion. Walking across it is like pacing across the slowest explosion ever recorded. You begin to understand something deeper now. These traders don't just move goods. They move stories. Salt slabs etched with effort. Ropes knotted by unspoken rules. Feet hardened not just by sun, but by time. You're watching a human migration that never stopped. A march of necessity, yes, but also of purpose. A rhythm handed down, not written, not taught in school, but imprinted through footstep after footstep across a place that barely tolerates your presence. The fire burns low. The camp quiets. Someone hums. A low melody, slow and wordless, floating just above the salt. It's not a lullaby, more like a reminder that the road stretches on, that the feet will keep walking, that the salt will still be here, long after the rest of us dissolve. You close your eyes, and for once, the heat feels earned. Morning in the Danakil doesn't ease in. It strikes. The first rays hit the flats like a spotlight, slicing through any lingering cool with surgical precision. There's no gentle dawn chorus here, just the clatter of camel harnesses and the scratch of feet against salt. Time to get moving again. And now, finally, we need to talk about food. Because if the thirst doesn't get you, hunger surely will, unless you know what to eat, when to eat it, and how to do it without collapsing. You won't find farming here. There's no soil, no rain, and definitely no sprinklers. The Danakil's menu is built on 3 pillars: durability, portability, and pure survival instinct. You're offered breakfast. And by offered, we mean someone slides a leathery pouch towards you with a nod. Inside, fermented camel milk, slightly warm, sharp on the nose, and vaguely fizzy. It tastes like liquid yogurt left in a sunbeam for just a bit too long. But here's the thing. It works. Fermented milk is a staple in the region, made from camel or goat, depending on what's nearby. It's high in fat, loaded with gut-friendly bacteria, and, most importantly, it lasts. No refrigeration needed, just a skin pouch, a bit of patience, and a surprisingly tolerant palate. The second item on your culinary tour, dried meat, usually goat. Thin strips, cured with salt and sun until they're closer to jerky than anything juicy. Chewy, yes. Flavorful? Depends how long you've been walking. But it provides protein with very little water required to digest. A clever biological advantage in a place where even a sip is precious. Then there's the flatbread. Kicha, a dry, unleavened bread baked on hot stones or a metal pan, depending on what's available. No yeast, no rising, no fuss. Just flour, water, and heat. Sometimes it's flavored with charcoal dust, sometimes goat fat, sometimes nothing. It exists to fill the stomach, not thrill the taste buds. One young Afar girl giggles as you chew it, watching your mouth move like it's trying to remember what softness feels like. You try to smile with a mouthful of edible cardboard. She offers you something else. Boiled blood. You pause. You blink. You remember your manners. She pours a little into a wooden bowl. It's thick, dark, and smells oddly metallic. This is an ancient dish, taken from goats or camels, boiled quickly to coagulate it, then eaten warm or cooled. It's protein-rich, iron-packed, and shockingly efficient. The blood is taken carefully, not to kill, but to supplement. One small wound, one meal. The animal lives. So do you. Scientists still argue about the nutritional balance of such diets. How can people survive, thrive even, on so little greenery? But the answer seems to lie in adaptation, efficiency, and the body's ability to fine-tune itself to its environment. And it's not just meat and milk. Every now and then, someone unpacks a small pouch of dried herbs or spices, collected during rare trips to less hostile lands or traded from distant caravans. They're used sparingly, more for symbolism than seasoning. One pinch can turn survival food into something that feels like culture. You're handed a small cup of tea, brewed dark and bitter with ash-smudged fingers. It's hot. Why wouldn't it be? But it jumpstarts your mind in the groggy morning haze. Sometimes, desert dwellers flavor their tea with a sprig of wild basil or dried ginger. Other times, it's just water, leaves, and the memory of comfort. Here's your quirky fact. In some camps, meals are served with silence. Not because of strict etiquette, but because talking wastes moisture through the breath. Ever tried whispering while chewing dry bread? You learn fast. Food isn't social here. It's sacred. In a far culture, eating is a private, functional affair. Meals are small, often shared, and always tied to what the land or the livestock can provide. There's no waste, no second servings, no buffet line. You eat what there is, when there is, and never forget where it came from. As the sun creeps higher, a boy squats beside a shallow pit filled with coals, roasting a thin goat rib. You watch the grease sizzle into the dust. That smell, rich, smoky, primal, cuts through the dryness like music. You want to savor it. But the boy eats quickly, his eyes already scanning the horizon. Because mealtime never lasts long here. There's always a caravan to load, a journey to plan, a shelter to move. Calories are counted in footsteps, not spoonfuls. Still, you feel stronger now. A little milk, a little bread, a little meat. Enough to keep going. You ask, through a translator, if they ever get bored of eating the same things. The response is quick. We don't eat for excitement, we eat for walking. Afar humor, dry as their bread. You glance around and realize that everything about this place, every tool, every recipe, every ritual, is calibrated not for indulgence, but endurance. Food here doesn't comfort, it fuels. And in a landscape where comfort is a fantasy, fuel is everything. And yet, there's joy. The kids still sneak scraps when no one's looking. Elders still hum while preparing broth. A shared bowl becomes a bond. Even when it's just blood and bread, there's a ceremony to it, a rhythm. Because eating here is not about abundance, it's about respect. Respect for the animal, respect for the sun, and respect for the miracle of simply having something to chew. As you lick the salt from your lips and squint into the rising light, you realize something profound. In the Danakil, survival isn't about resisting hunger. It's about redefining satisfaction. A belly just full enough, a drink just cold enough, a bite just long enough to make it to the next one. And somehow, that's enough. The sun dips low again, casting gold and lavender over the salt flats, and the heat, for once, begins to loosen its grip. You feel the moment it happens, like the release of a clenched fist you didn't know you were inside. The world doesn't become cool, but it becomes possible. And that's when the Afar people look up. not toward shelter this time, but toward the stars. Because while the sun governs the day with brute force, the night sky is where strategy lives. It's not just beautiful, it's a map, a calendar, and sometimes a warning. You're sitting near a low fire, the last flames of goat dung glowing quietly under a pot of spiced milk. Around you, the caravan men are relaxed in a way they never are under the sun. Some lie back on rolled blankets. Others chew dried cot leaves to stay sharp and talkative. A few sharpen blades, but without urgency. The danger is low now. For a few short hours, the heat won't kill you. The sky above the Danakil is astonishing, with no pollution, no lights, and no buildings to block your view. It seems infinite. The stars don't twinkle, they blaze. Familiar constellations, Orion, the Pleiades, even the band of the Milky Way, stand clear, etched into black like stories waiting to be retold. But these aren't just pretty lights. The Afar people have relied on these constellations for centuries to navigate, plan, and survive. Certain star patterns tell them when to migrate, when to expect wind shifts, or when salt lakes are beginning to soften, dangerous for walking. The appearance of Sirius, for instance, is a herald of dry months. And Orion's belt? Not a hunter here. It's the spine of the sky, pointing the way home. You lean back, belly full of tea and breadcrumbs, and listen as an elder tells stories of the stars. Not low myths, at least not in the way you're used to. These are weather reports disguised as fables. Survival advice wrapped in celestial metaphors. See that one? He says, pointing to a bright star just above the horizon. That's the eye of the hyena. When it rises early, the winds will bite. You want to ask for clarification, but another man just nods. That's all the explanation needed. Scientists still argue about how ancient desert cultures track time so precisely without instruments. Some suggest that the clarity of the night sky made people naturally more observant. Others think it's oral tradition, passed down, refined, cross-checked across generations. Either way, it works. Always has. Here's a quirky fact to savor under the stars. Some Afar families used to carry small polished stones with holes in the middle. Not jewelry, not toys, but tools, primitive star trackers. Hold one to your eye and align it with a star, and over time, you could measure its shift. It was like carrying a portable telescope from the Neolithic. And it wasn't just navigation. Timekeeping, too, was written in the sky. In a land where days blur into heat and salt, nights are when planning happens. People tell time not in hours, but in constellations. Dinner finishes, and someone brings out a goatskin drum. Just a few low beats at first. Rhythmic, soft, deliberate. A few women begin a chant. Not words exactly, more like a call and response made from breath and repetition. You let it wash over you, not understanding the language, but grasping the meaning all the same. It's rhythm. That's what the night offers. Rhythm when the day only gives chaos. You take a walk with one of the younger herders. He's tall, wiry, wrapped in a patterned shawl. His name is Ali. He moves with effortless quiet, pointing occasionally to animal tracks in the crust. A fox? A snake? A goat that wandered too far? You ask him if he's ever been lost. He shrugs. I follow the stars, he says. Then, with a grin, and the goats. They always know. Another joke wrapped in truth. Livestock are better than compasses here. Goats follow instincts sharpened by generations. Where they stop, People build fires. You climb a small rise, just a few meters of hardened lava crust, and from the top, you see it, the molten glow of Erta Ele, the lava lake, always simmering, always waiting. It flickers red on the horizon like a warning light from the planet's core. You'll get closer to it later. For now, it's a reminder that beneath all this salt and silence, the Earth is very much awake. You and Ali sit. He smokes something wrapped in palm fiber, and you listen to the crackling of salt as it cools. It makes a sound like distant rain, a strange comfort in a place that's forgotten what real rain feels like. The stars shift. Someone calls out from camp. 3 short whistles. It means a camel's wandered. Ali flicks his cigarette and stands. Coming? He asks. You shake your head. Your feet hurt. Your brain's still chewing on star maps and molten rock. He nods, then jogs lightly down the slope. Barefoot, of course. You stay seated, knees drawn up, watching the glow of the volcano and the frost-bright stars. This is when it sinks in. In the Danakil, the night isn't just a break from the day. It's the other half of the survival equation. The stars don't just decorate the sky. They tell you when to move, when to wait, when the heat will rise again like a grudge, and when you might just have a few safe hours to breathe. Because here, the lava may glow beneath your feet, but the stars show you how not to fall in. Dawn returns like an old rival. No warning, no mercy. The sky barely has time to change color before the light burns down again. There's no golden hour in the Danakil, just a short moment when the sun teases you with the idea it might behave differently today. Spoiler, it won't. You stretch your aching limbs and rub the sleep from your eyes. But out here, rest isn't really restful. Sleep is shallow. Dreams are fleeting. The desert never truly lets go of you. This morning, you're not walking. You're staying put in a small cluster of family shelters to observe the less glamorous, but arguably more important part of survival, social life. Because even in a land where the ground cooks your sandals and the sky forgets how to cry, people still live together. They laugh, they argue, they fall in love, and sometimes they do all 3 at once. You start by watching a family prepare breakfast. A pot of milk on a coal stove, some hard bread broken into pieces, and children moving slowly, eyes still half-lidded from sleep. One girl slaps her brother with a reed when he tries to steal her piece. He shrugs. She wins. It's in these small moments that you begin to understand how heat shapes human relationships. You see, in temperate climates, energy is cheap. People shout across rooms. They dance without thinking. They multitask. But here, no one wastes motion. Everything, conversation, work, even affection, is slow, precise, and considered. It's not that people here don't love each other. It's just that they love with fewer calories. Afar families tend to live in tight-knit units, often multi-generational, sharing shade, water, food, and duties. Privacy is a luxury no one can afford. Thin tent walls mean everything is overheard, but there's an unspoken code. You don't speak of what you hear, and you don't pretend to need space. You sit with an elder named Medina, her fingers deftly weaving palm fibers into rope. Her hands move without thought, like she's known this rhythm since birth. She speaks slowly, pausing often, not from age, but from strategy. Each sentence is measured like water in a drought. Heat, she says, teaches silence. Too much talk dries your throat. And yet somehow, she keeps talking. Stories of her grandmother, who walked barefoot across salt flats while 8 months pregnant. Stories of weddings at midnight, under starry skies, when the air cooled just enough for dancing. Stories of funerals with no crying, only singing, because tears are better saved for dust storms. Scientists still argue about how extreme climates influence social behavior. Some say harsh environments push people apart, survival of the fittest, every man for himself. Others insist that shared hardship tightens bonds. Here, it's clearly the latter. You watch as neighbors pass water jugs between shelters without speaking. One woman refills another's kettle with a slight nod. A boy shoos goats from someone else's tent with a practiced clap. Everyone is tuned into the same rhythm, the same low-frequency empathy. And yet, the heat doesn't erase hierarchy. Afar culture, like many pastoral societies, is deeply structured. Elders carry authority. Men tend to herd. Women tend to homes. Children obey everyone. But there's flexibility too, especially during crisis. If water is short, age and gender matter less than skill. Whoever can find it leads. And here's your quirky insight of the day. In many Afar communities, marriage proposals once involved a surprising test: sweat endurance. A suitor might be invited to sit near a fire with the girl's father and brothers. No water, no escape. If he withstood the heat without flinching, he proved he was tough enough to join the family. Romance. Tranquil style. You try to imagine Tinder operating out here. Swipe right if your goat herd is healthy. Swipe left if your water jug leaks. Courtship is quiet. Glances, small offerings, shared labor. A man might fix a woman's shelter wall, or she might add extra spice to his tea. Everything subtle, everything earned. You walk now among the tents as midday looms. Most people are settling in for rest, but a few remain active, repairing mats, sharpening tools, mending goat harnesses. A group of teenage boys argue over a broken radio. The radio, by the way, is older than all of them combined. And through it all, the social rules hold. No shouting unless someone's dying. No running unless something's on fire. And never, ever hoard water. Because in this place, selfishness can be fatal. You return to Medina. She offers you tea again, this time sweetened with something like date sugar. She fans herself with a piece of cardboard and gestures at the children nearby. They fight now, she says. Later they carry each other. You ask her what the worst part of the heat is. She doesn't hesitate. It makes you forget your thoughts, she says. If you are not careful, your anger rises with the sun. That explains the quiet. Not just cultural, it's practical. Silence keeps tempers cool. Fewer words, fewer sparks. The community depends on it. You rest in the shade as the sun goes white hot again. Around you, families nap. Babies suckle quietly. And somewhere, someone sings under their breath. Social survival in the Danakil isn't about big declarations or loud loyalty. It's about presence, showing up, sharing shade, offering half your bread without being asked. You watch a young boy tuck his sister's scarf tighter around her shoulders as she sleeps. She doesn't wake. He doesn't explain. That's what life here teaches. In the absence of comfort, kindness becomes subtle, but never small. You're jolted awake, not by heat this time, but by something colder, sharper. Not in temperature, of course. In tone, raised voices, clanging metal, the unmistakable rhythm of tension, conflict. Even in a place this remote, especially in a place this harsh, fighting over resources isn't just common, it's historical. And today, you're learning that the Danakil isn't just hot in the air. It's hot on the ground, in politics, and sometimes in blood. You sit up, peering past the tent flaps. A small group of men has gathered around two camels, one clearly not tied where it should be. An argument in fast afar erupts. Arms gesture toward a pile of salt slabs. One man draws a knife, not to attack, just to make his point louder. The blade flashes. The others flinch, but no one runs. Welcome to the unwritten law of the salt routes. Everything is negotiable until it's not. You see, the Danakil Depression salt isn't just a geological marvel. It's an economic prize. And where there's wealth, there's always someone trying to take more than their share. For centuries, salt caravans like the ones you've been walking with have been targets for theft. Not from roving bandits in masks, though that's happened too, but from rival clans, opportunistic outsiders, and even neighboring countries. This is where you learn that desert politics is an actual thing. Borders here are, well, fuzzy. Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti. Lines are drawn on maps, sure. But out here, on the salt flats, tribal land and historical rights mean more than treaties signed in air-conditioned rooms. And when those salt profits cross into disputed territory, things get complicated fast. You listen as the men work it out, eventually. A second camel is offered in compromise. There's still tension, but the knife disappears. Salt is restacked. No one's smiling, but no one's bleeding either. That's considered a win. And yet, these kinds of standoffs have sparked far worse in the past. Centuries ago, rival groups fought over brine pools, grazing corridors, and access to the best salt pits. Some battles were small, others turned generational. Family bloodlines today can still recite where their ancestors stood in ancient desert skirmishes. In fact, some elders still carry scars, souvenirs from the salt wars of their youth. That's not a metaphor. There were actual armed conflicts over piles of minerals scraped from the crust of the earth. Scientists still argue about the economic value of traditional salt slabs in today's globalized world, but locally, they remain powerful. They represent autonomy, resilience, and ancestral pride. Losing access to salt isn't just financial, it's cultural erasure. You sit now beside a group of older traders. One of them, a man with one eye and zero pretense, tells you about his first raid. We went at dusk, he says, took their camels, left the salt. They didn't deserve the animals. You wait for the punchline. There isn't one. Desert justice, it seems, is like the terrain. Dry, direct, and brutally honest. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some camel saddles are custom carved with tribal symbols, not just for identification, but as a form of passive warning. This salt belongs to these people. Take it, and the entire clan remembers your name. Think of it like tagging your lunch in the office fridge, except the fridge is the sun, and the lunch is guarded by armed cousins. As you walk farther from camp, you see more evidence of long-term conflict. Abandoned shelters, half buried in shifting salt. Rusted tools stuck in the ground like forgotten warnings. A small pile of stones arranged in a tight circle, either a marker, a memorial, or both. And if you're thinking, surely this is all in the past, think again. Even today, salt smuggling is real. Some traders cut across closed borders to avoid taxes or gain better prices. Others fight to protect ancestral pits from industrial companies, looking to mechanize what has always been done by hand. You meet a young man named Idris, maybe 22, who tells you proudly that he once chased off 3 smugglers by throwing a rock and yelling like a hyena. "They thought I had a rifle," he says, laughing. Did he? No, just good lungs. You walk together toward a ridge of jagged rock, volcanic, black, and blistered by sun. Idris points to a distant speck on the horizon. "That's where the soldiers came," he says, squinting. "Long time ago. Said they owned the salt. We said, so does the sun. They didn't come back." Desert humor again, equal parts poetry and threat. Scientists studying the region often note that conflict here doesn't escalate quickly. It burns slow. Grudges last generations. Battles are often traded for barter. Standoffs resolved with gifts of goats or salt. But the tension is always there, just beneath the crust. And yet, people still cooperate. Despite all this, rival caravans still camp near one another. Children from different clans still play together, trading stones or teaching each other words from their dialects. Because ultimately, survival trumps division. And even enemies agree that no one beats the heat alone. As dusk settles again, the tension from earlier fades. The camp rebuilds its rhythm. Food is shared. Laughter returns. A small radio crackles to life, playing a song that sounds like static and joy at the same time. And you, sitting in the flickering firelight, hands coated with dust, brain spinning with stories of silent wars and salty politics, begin to understand something new. Out here, conflict isn't always loud. Sometimes it just walks beside you, quiet and barefoot, holding a chisel. You're lying down now, arms tucked behind your head, staring at the sky as it flickers with stars and faint streaks of dust. It's peaceful, eerily so. But the Danakil rarely stays peaceful for long, because in this place, the earth doesn't just punish with heat, it whispers too. And sometimes it lies. It's time you learned about the springs, the cursed ones, the oases that deceive, the boiling pools that beckon with shimmer and promise, only to take more than they give. Your host, a man named Gaba, leads you to one such place just before dawn. You walk in silence, his silhouette sharp against the pale terrain, until you reach a low basin of rock that seems almost out of place. Greenish water resting in the middle of a crater. Steam curling upward like a spell gone wrong. Gaba gestures toward the pool. "She looks cool," he says. "She isn't." He doesn't mean the water. This is Dalal, one of the strangest geothermal sites on Earth. A volcanic wasteland where acidic springs bubble in technicolor pools. Neon yellow, jade green, blood orange. The landscape looks like someone spilled paint across Mars. It's mesmerizing and absolutely deadly. You step closer, but not too close. The air is thick with sulfur, eggy, metallic, sour. It makes your nose sting and your skin itch. The ground crunches under your feet, not from dryness, but from mineral crusts, so fragile you could break through into acid with one misstep. Dalal is what scientists call a hydrothermal field, and it's one of the few places where water exists in its most hostile form, boiling, acidic, and saturated with heavy metals. It's water that forgot how to help. Scientists still argue over whether Dalal can support any life at all. Some say extremophile microbes might cling to existence here. Others claim it's the closest place on Earth to being truly sterile, a natural dead zone. Either way, it's a place where humans should not loiter. And yet, people once did. You hear the stories in fragments, whispered among camps at night. A trader who dipped his hand in the wrong spring and never used that hand again. A camel that collapsed on a crust that gave way, lost to acid and silence. A man who drank from a cool pool by mistake, died before he could finish his second swallow. These aren't bedtime tales. They're warnings. But not all danger here is physical. Some is spiritual. Gaba tells you about Ayla, desert spirits that live in places like Dalil, tricksters and tempters who take the form of shifting winds or sudden thirst. They don't chase or curse. They simply confuse, lead travelers astray, whisper directions that end in boiling holes. You want to dismiss this as folklore, superstition, but then you hear the silence around the pool, the way even insects seem to avoid this spot, and the heat, not loud, not angry, but humming like a low drum beat under your feet. Some places aren't haunted, they're just aware. Here's a quirky cultural insight. Certain Afar families carry charms woven from goat hair and colored beads, meant to protect them from salt spirits, entities that are said to rise from the earth in dust devils or shapeshift into mirages. Children are taught not to point at the horizon during high noon, not because it's rude, but because it might draw something's attention. You sip warm water from your pouch and glance sideways at the spring again. It bubbles faintly, as if amused. People still come, Gaba says. They always come. They think they are smarter than the desert. Spoiler alert, they're not. You move away slowly, feeling the ground grow firmer beneath your feet again, the air less sour. Back at camp, the morning heat is beginning its slow ambush. But you can't shake the feeling that something followed you from the spring. Not a spirit, maybe. Just awareness. You sit in the shade with a small group of women preparing a herbal paste. It smells sharp and earthy. One of them explains it's for rubbing on skin to protect against both heat and evil eyes. Two threats of equal weight here. Both can burn, she says simply. It's strange to realize that belief and survival are so intertwined. In places of abundance, myths are hobbies. In the Danakil, they're tools. Not just stories, but structures for making sense of danger when logic falls short. Even now, the supernatural blends seamlessly with the scientific. Boiling pools are explained as both volcanic vents and spirit mouths. Salt flats are seen as sacred bodies left behind by ancient gods. The shimmering mirages that dance across the land at midday, those are Ashura, phantoms sent to test your patience. And patience is everything, because most deaths out here don't come from sudden eruptions or dramatic chases. They come from believing the land will give more than it does. From walking 5 minutes too long toward a false spring. From assuming cool water means safe water. From forgetting, even for a second, that the earth here is ancient and bored of humans. As evening nears, the wind shifts again. A dust devil kicks up, spinning across the flats like a playful warning. Someone mutters a prayer and tosses a pinch of ash into the air, just in case. You sit very still, just breathing, listening. The desert doesn't speak in sentences, but it does speak. And the smartest thing you can do is listen. As the wind dies again, the heat returns, Not like a blast this time, but like a blanket. Heavy, suffocating, familiar. And yet, people still move, still work, still do things, even under the weight of this inferno. Which means you've come to one of the most fascinating truths of desert life. Humans in the Danakil didn't just survive with grit, they survived with tools. But don't picture sleek gadgets or shiny machines. These tools are ancient, simple, and sometimes utterly bizarre. Welcome to the low-tech, high-survival ingenuity of one of Earth's most extreme environments. You begin with the humble water skin. Not plastic, not metal, but stitched camel or goat stomachs, cured over smoke and sealed with resin. They're lightweight, collapsible, and naturally insulating. And they don't just hold water, they cool it, slightly. Through a process called evaporative cooling, moisture seeps through the skin's pores and evaporates on the outside, dropping the water temperature inside by a degree or two. It's not ice cold, but in 48 degrees Celsius heat, it feels like mercy. One trader shows you his water skin, dark and weathered, shaped like a strange balloon. 20 years old, he says proudly, better than plastic, never melts. You try to lift it. It's heavy, but perfectly balanced. It swings on a rope from the side of his camel, like it's part of the animal itself. Now let's talk about sun protection. Forget SPF 50. Out here, they had something better. Dung-based sunscreen. Yes, you heard that right. Scientists still argue about the chemical effectiveness, but the practice is real. Afar, people once mixed goat dung with ash and a bit of oil to create a thick, pasty smear applied to the skin. It created a reflective barrier that blocked UV rays surprisingly well. Smelly? Absolutely. But again, if it works, it works. You ask one elder how long he wore the stuff. Every day, he says, from boy to man, we were brown ghosts. Another traditional tool, the stone thermos. Imagine you need to keep something cool in the heat. What do? Afar households used to carve small chambers in dense volcanic rock, bury them slightly, and store food or liquids inside. These stone coolers, positioned in the shade and sometimes wrapped in damp cloth, could maintain lower temperatures even in open air. It's refrigeration by geology. Then there are the wind traps. You spot one attached to a shelter, a small, tunnel-shaped frame lined with slats of woven reed positioned to catch the faintest breeze. These aren't fans. They're passive cooling systems. As wind enters, it funnels through tighter gaps, accelerating and cooling slightly before reaching the inside of the tent. It's not air conditioning, but in the Danakil, it feels like it. Here's your quirky tidbit. Afar, herders used to create mini evaporative fridges by hanging wet fabric around milk containers, then suspending them from tree branches or poles. The breeze would hit the wet cloth, cool the milk inside, and prevent it from spoiling too quickly. One shepherd claims his method kept milk fresh for 4 days. Long enough, he said, to find someone to drink it. You're beginning to see a pattern. The Danakil isn't just hostile, it's interactive. It dares you to find answers. And the people here accepted that dare a long time ago. Even the footwear, or lack thereof, is strategic. Some herders fashion soles from thick layers of camel hide, tied with rope or sinew. Others wear nothing at all, relying on hardened calluses and an instinct for where the crust will burn less. A few even carry water to cool their feet mid-journey, splashing just enough to survive the next 10 steps. And tools aren't always objects. Sometimes they're techniques, like how to walk, not fast, not slow, but in a rhythmic glide that minimizes friction and maximizes airflow. Or how to breathe through the nose with a scarf loosely draped to trap dust and slow dehydration. Even how to stand changes here. Weight off the heels, more balanced on the toes, to reduce heat transfer from ground to body. Scientists have recorded these micro adaptations as part of what's known as behavioral thermoregulation. In other words, using movement and posture, not just gear, to stay alive. You watch a young girl now, maybe 8 years old, lift a pot from a fire using just the edge of her scarf. She tilts it, pours tea for 5, and doesn't spill a drop. Her hands never touch the clay. She learned that from watching her mother, who learned from hers. No one taught her formally. The desert did. Even playtime becomes tactical. Children here don't run for fun. They build shade forts, balance rocks, mimic camel herding. One game involves timing your movements to step only in the shadow of someone else's footsteps. You try it. It's hard, but weirdly satisfying. These are tools too. Not toys, but exercises in anticipation, in movement, in living with heat instead of against it. And while modern technology has crept in, solar panels, mobile phones, GPS trackers, many traditional tools remain. Not because of nostalgia, but because they still work. One man shows you his GPS unit clipped to his belt. Next to it, a compass carved from bone. "This one works," he says, pointing to the tech. "This one works when that one dies." He taps the bone. You smile. He doesn't. That's the Danakil attitude. Trust your tools, but trust the old ones first. And as the sun reaches its sharpest angle, and the wind-trapped tent lets in a merciful breeze, you realize something beautiful. Survival here isn't high-tech. It's high sense. And sometimes, the most powerful tool is knowing exactly when to stop moving. The ground beneath your feet changes again. Gone is the comforting crunch of salt crust or the sharp scatter of volcanic stone. Now you feel it, thin, treacherous, and hot enough to boil the hope right out of your boots. You've reached the edge of one of the Danakil's most surreal zones, the crust walk. Out here, the earth isn't solid. It only pretends to be. And yet people walk it, barefoot. The Afar have been crossing this brittle, lava-scarred terrain for centuries, sometimes with camels, sometimes alone. You trail behind one such herder now, his silhouette dancing across the wavering horizon. His name is Salan. He's carrying a hooked stick, not for support, but for testing the earth. Because in some places, the ground can give way. Beneath the crust lies superheated mud, or brine, or lava tubes worn thin by time and pressure. One wrong step, and snap, you're gone, and not with drama, with silence. Salan stops suddenly. He crouches, taps the ground twice, then steps slightly to the right. You follow, mimicking his motion. The crust creaks like old wood beneath your foot. You freeze. "Soft," he says simply. "Don't stand long." He keeps walking. You'd think this kind of terrain would be avoided, that no one would willingly march across what's essentially a stretched-out death trap. But here's the twist. It's faster. In a landscape filled with ridges, rifts, and boiling pools, these crust walks are shortcuts. They shave days off salt routes. They connect water caches and night shelters. And they serve as escape paths when conflict sparks between clans. They're dangerous, but efficient. Scientists still argue over how these lava crusts remain stable for so long. Some say it's the mineral density. Others point to heat gradients or microseismic silent zones. Salin just says, it hasn't broken yet. And that's enough for him. You keep walking. The heat radiates up, not down. The crust beneath you glows faintly red in places. Residual warmth from magma not too far below. It's like walking on a stove set to low simmer. You notice small vents, natural steam holes, hissing gently, releasing pressure from the Earth's endless inner boil. At one point, Salon steps around a circle of blackened rock. He nods to it. Man died there. You don't ask for details. Instead, you ask about migration. How people moved across this nightmare long before maps, before compasses, before warning signs. He points to the wind. It tells us. It's true. The Afar learned to read wind patterns the way others read street signs. A sudden shift in direction might mean danger ahead, a sulfur vent, a soft crust, even hostile patrols. A consistent breeze, especially one that smells like ash, often signals safety. Lava cools, wind flows, path clears. You pause and scan the surroundings. It's flat in every direction, but not dull. The surface is textured with thousands of hexagonal cracks, fractures that look like dried skin or ancient parchment. And every so often, you see the faded mark of a sandal or a barefoot print hardened in the salt. Salin points at one. That's my uncle, he says. From when I was a child. You stare. The print is shallow but distinct, preserved in mineral crust like a fossil. It could be 10 years old, or 100. Time gets weird out here. Here's your quirky fact. Some routes are named not for landmarks, but for footprints. The path of Karu's toes, the place where Ali turned back, the split-heel trail. It's cartography through memory, navigation by nostalgia. Walking these paths is more than travel. It's a ritual. Before crossing a new crust, some families perform small rites, touching the earth, muttering a line of poetry, tossing a stone behind them. Not because they expect magic, but because out here, everything is a prayer. As midday hits, you stop near a rocky outcrop. Salam pulls out a lump of dried goat fat and chews it slowly. He offers you some. It tastes like wax and regret, but it fills you. Then he tells you something strange. When I was young, he says, we thought the earth was trying to shake us off, like a dog with flies. You wait. But we learned to hold on. You think about that as you walk again, testing each step, scanning for heat pockets, avoiding cracks. You think about the generations of people who didn't just survive here, but walked here, not because they had to, but because they chose to. They walked for trade, for migration, for weddings, for war. They walked across lava and salt and silence, carrying their homes, their families, their futures, one careful step at a time. You feel the crust give slightly beneath you again. Just a flex, not a break. You keep moving. Because in the Danakil, standing still is dangerous, but so is rushing forward. And somewhere between those two truths is how you learn to walk on fire. By now, the Danakil has left its mark on you. Not physically, though the sunburn forming on your nose disagrees, but mentally, spiritually, maybe even philosophically. You've sweated through your clothes more times than you can count. Shared bread in silence with strangers. dodged boiling pools and walked on lava like it was a sidewalk. And now, here's a twist. Because as modern life encroaches, so does a strange contradiction. People still living like their ancestors while adapting to technologies that, not long ago, would have seemed like science fiction. You're back in a settlement, but this one's different. You spot solar panels tilted toward the brutal sky. A small metal cell tower buzzes in the distance, camouflaged against the rocks. And leaning against a salt block, a teenager scrolling on a smartphone. Welcome to the edge of the future. Here in the Danakil, modernity doesn't arrive in waves. It seeps in, quiet, tentative, then suddenly everywhere. A shepherd checks camel tracks in the dirt, then sends a voice message to his cousin in another village. A grandmother stirs goat stew, while a small radio mutters news from Addis Ababa. A child sits beneath a tarp, not whittling wood, but watching cartoons on a cracked Android. You speak with a guide named Hassan. He's wearing rubber sandals and a shirt that says, "Just do it." In cracked letters, he speaks 4 languages fluently. He also knows how to find clean water, using nothing but wind patterns and a finger to the sky. Balance, he says, shrugging. We use what works. Modern tools help. Radios allow caravans to communicate over vast distances, especially important in times of conflict. GPS units help with terrain that even seasoned guides admit is becoming harder to read due to geological shifts and salt mining. Drones are even used by some research teams to scout volcanic activity. And yet, the camel is still here. So is the salt. So is the rhythm. You ask Hassan if he'd ever want to leave the Danakil. For a day, he grins, then I miss the heat. Scientists still argue about the impact of modern intrusion on traditional survival systems. Some fear that cultural knowledge, like how to find hidden brine or read goat behavior before a dust storm, will vanish. Others argue that tech can preserve these traditions, documenting them before they fade. Hassan isn't worried. The sun still wins, he says. Doesn't matter how many apps you have. Here's a quirky fact. Some Afar herders have figured out how to charge phones using homemade solar setups attached to camel saddles. One guy even modified his water skin to hold a battery bank inside. It keeps it cool, he says proudly. You watch a teenage girl texting her friend, then turning to slap a goat gently for straying. It's surreal, but it's real. Meanwhile, there's industry. Salt mining is changing. No longer entirely chiseled by hand, some areas now host machines, slow-moving metal beasts grinding through what was once chiseled with wooden blades. Workers wear plastic helmets and neon vests. Some hate it, some love it. You meet a man named Ayob who worked for an international mining company. He made good money, but came back. The machine doesn't know how to walk around the dead pools, he tells you. It fell in twice. Still, there's no stopping it. The world wants salt. The Danakil has it. And companies want efficiency. But traditional salt cutters, men like Salan, who you remember from the crust walk, still pride themselves on their trade. Not because it's easy, but because it means something. It's not just about the salt, he says. It's about how you take it. And then there are the tourists. Yes, tourists. Somehow, word got out that the hottest place on Earth makes a great vacation photo. Instagrammers in floppy hats now arrive in air-conditioned jeeps, snapping selfies in front of acid pools they don't understand. Drones buzz overhead, like robotic mosquitoes. Locals watch, sometimes with amusement, sometimes with fatigue. You meet a young woman named Layla, who works as a part-time guide, fluent in English, wears a scarf that changes color in the light. They ask me if we ride camels to school, she says, rolling her eyes. I tell them only when the Wi-Fi is down. She laughs, but she's serious too, because tourism brings money, and with it, pressure. Pressure to perform tradition, to wear the right outfits, to carry salt blocks for show. It's a double-edged dagger. Attention brings survival, but it also risks distortion. Still, the Afar adapt. They always have. Because beneath the new logos and blinking screens, the same old rules apply. The sun still rises angry. Water still hides. The ground still breathes fire. And so long as that remains true, no gadget will matter more than knowing when to rest in shade or when to duck a dust devil. That's the final lesson of this strange collision between past and present. Modern tools may arrive. Some will help, others will fail. But the desert doesn't change. And the people who endure it? They've already built their survival code. The rest of the world is just catching up. You knew it was coming. At some point in this journey, you had to confront the real limit. Not of tools or tradition, not even of belief, but of the human body. Because here in the Danakil Depression, your greatest enemy is your own biology. You're lying flat now in the shade of a tattered tarp, a wet cloth across your neck, your breath shallow and deliberate. It's not exhaustion. It's thermoregulation failure, a fancy phrase for your body slowly waving a white flag. Even the strongest desert dwellers have to respect the line between coping and collapse. The human body prefers to hum along at around 37 degrees Celsius, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. But once your core temp climbs toward 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, the machine starts misfiring. Muscles cramp, vision tunnels. Decision-making turns into something between a coin toss and a hallucination. And in a place like the Danakil, where the ambient air temperature can reach 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit, and ground temps can fry meat, your body doesn't just work overtime. It declares war on itself. You meet a local herder named Asmaro. He's short, wiry, and walks like someone who's studied gravity long enough to disrespect it. You ask him what it feels like when the heat gets too much. You forget your name, he says. Then you remember the sun's name instead. Charming, alarming, true. Heat stroke is a real killer here, and often silent. No drama, no warning, just a slow fade. First you stop sweating, then you stop thinking. And out here, where shade is rationed and water is never a guarantee, one mistake can mean everything. Scientists still argue about how much heat a healthy human can withstand before organs begin shutting down. Theories range from 42 degrees Celsius, 107.6 degrees Fahrenheit, to 44 degrees Celsius, 111 degrees Fahrenheit, core body temperature. But those are lab numbers. In the Danakil, no one has time for clinical thresholds. You either read your body well or you pay dearly. And so, the Afar have become masters of micro-adjustments. Watch closely and you'll see it. Tiny signals of thermoregulation strategy. A cloth moved half an inch to redirect sweat. A mouth covered to reduce moisture loss through exhaling. a step into shadow timed just right to avoid the hottest crust. There's even a way of breathing, slow, through the nose, in rhythm with footfalls. It's not mindfulness, it's math. Fewer breaths per minute means less water lost. It's biology as choreography. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some camps, when someone shows signs of heat confusion, they're not rushed to water. They're buried in sand, not as punishment, but as treatment. The sand under the surface is cooler than the air above. It draws heat out slowly, evenly. Think of it as the Danakil version of a cold bath. You watch this happen once. A boy, maybe 10, swaying from too much sun. His aunt gently leads him to a shaded pit, scoops the sand over his legs and arms, and places a damp cloth on his chest. No panic, no shouting, just instinct. 30 minutes later, he's up again, chewing dry bread and sipping goat milk like nothing happened. The body, it turns out, can adapt. The Afar sweat less than most outsiders, not because they're dehydrated, but because their bodies have learned to sweat only when it matters. Their skin thickens slightly under constant UV exposure. Their muscle mass remains lean. Less insulation means better heat dissipation. Even their diets support this. High salt, high fat, low volume. Efficient fuel for an inefficient furnace. But still, there's a line. You meet a man named Aiden. His skin is cracked from sunburn layered over years of exposure. He walks slowly, deliberately. You ask how he keeps going. I don't, he says. I stop a lot. You just never see it. You think about that for a long time. Because that might be the real survival trick here. Not resilience, but pacing. The body can survive the Danakil, but only if you treat it like a negotiation, not a dare. Sprint and you die. Stumble and you learn. Pause at the right moment, and you might just make it to nightfall. As the afternoon presses on, you feel the familiar tightening in your chest. Your mouth tastes like metal. Time to rest. Again. You duck into a canvas lean-to and lie flat, pressing your palms against the dirt floor. It's slightly cooler, not comfortable, just less awful. Someone passes you a pinch of ash and salt to rub on your lips. Another local trick. Preventing them from splitting in the heat, you close your eyes. Outside, goats shuffle past. A baby cries. Someone strikes flint for a cooking fire. Life, even here, continues. But the body insists. Stay still. That's another thing the desert teaches. Not heroism, not bravado, but obedience. You listen when your limbs say, no more. You drink even when you're not thirsty. You breathe as if each inhale costs money. And as your pulse slows, and the breeze finally pushes through a flap of canvas, you think about every person you've met so far, each one playing chess with their own biology, trying to outlast the day, trying to make it to dusk without collapsing. It's not about being tougher. It's about knowing your body like it's a companion, not a tool, and trusting that if you walk the line carefully enough, your body just might walk with you. The sun is beginning to lose its edge. Not quickly, never that, but with the reluctant grace of a tyrant ending its shift. Shadows stretch longer now, falling across the salt like lazy fingers. And here, in the golden hush of late afternoon, we come full circle. To the ones who never left, the Afar, still here, still sweating, still shaping a life where most wouldn't last a day. You walk back into a village nestled in a fold of salt and stone. It's not large, maybe a dozen tents, a few wandering goats, a tired boy fanning smoke away from a pot. But it feels alive. not surviving, living. You're greeted not with fanfare, but with familiarity. A nod from a grandmother spinning goat hair into rope, a toddler hiding behind her leg, a teenager who ignores you entirely because he's trying to fix a broken solar lantern. All of it is wonderfully ordinary. You sit near a fire pit with a man named Rami. He's sharpening a curved blade, the kind used for salt carving, or goat hooves, or possibly 1,000 other things. "You made it," he says, not looking up. You nod, still half dizzy from the afternoon heat. "Barely," you admit. He smiles. "Good. That's the correct amount." You talk with him as the sun slips behind a ridge. He tells you about his children, his caravan days, his goats, always the goats, and his hope that someday his granddaughter will become a doctor. Not so she can leave, he clarifies, but so she can come back and heal here where it matters. You ask him what's changed the most over the years. He thinks, sharpens, thinks again. "The earth is the same," he says finally. "The sky is lazier. People talk more, but the sun never forgets." You sit in silence together, and it hits you. The heat never made these people bitter. It made them precise. It carved away what wasn't essential. What's left is something that isn't quite toughness, but clarity. Children chase shadows now, giggling softly. A group of women sing as they grind grain, not loudly, just enough for the rhythm to carry. The goats bleat, unimpressed. You think about all the places on Earth where survival has been engineered through walls, wires, AC units, and algorithms. Then you think about this village, with its palm mats, dung fires, and solar chargers strapped to camel saddles, and wonder which is more advanced. Here's your final quirky tidbit. Some Afar families bury polished pieces of black volcanic glass, obsidian, beneath their shelters. Not for decoration, for balance. They believe the rock cools the energy of the home. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But every tent you've stepped inside that had obsidian beneath it somehow felt quieter. Scientists still argue about the long-term sustainability of pastoral life in the Danakil. Will climate change tip the scales? Will mining push people out? Will tourism dilute tradition until it's unrecognizable? Rami doesn't seem worried. "People say we live in the hottest place," he says. "But to us, it's just the place." And that's the truth. The Danakil isn't just heat and hardship. It's laughter and songs and stubborn goats and the occasional phone call that cuts out halfway through a joke. It's a place where people didn't just adapt. They innovated. They didn't just endure. They designed a whole world around the sun and lived to tell the tale. You rise, say goodbye, and begin your final walk through the flats as dusk cools the surface. The salt beneath your feet now feels different, still warm, but not hostile. The wind returns, gentle, familiar. The sky above fades from gold to violet to navy. You've survived the hottest place on Earth, not because you beat it, but because you listened. And in doing so, you've learned the final lesson of the Danakil. This place doesn't want to kill you. It just wants you to respect it. And those who do, they're still here, still sweating, still walking, still home. Now, let's slow things down together. The sun has dipped behind the jagged ridges. The salt flats are finally resting, holding on to the last warmth of the day like a quiet memory. The heat, once so sharp and relentless, has softened into something manageable, almost gentle. You walk slowly now, each step sinking just slightly into the crust. The air no longer pressing against your skin, but passing softly around you. The wind carries with it the smell of dust and goats, and maybe just a whisper of charcoal smoke. The laughter from the village fades into the distance. A baby murmurs. A camel groans like a door opening to dreams. You look up. The stars are arriving. First one, then two, then an entire sky of glitter. There are no buildings here, no billboards, no headlights, just endless space. Quiet, ancient. You lie down now, your head resting on a fold of cloth, the earth still warm beneath you. It's not uncomfortable. It's grounding. You can feel the planet's pulse, slow, deep, forgiving. You listen to your breath, slow, easy, just enough. And maybe now you understand what it means to be part of a landscape, not separate from it, to learn its rhythms, to move when it tells you to rest when it demands it. So let yourself drift. Let the salt and silence hold you. Let the heat become history. Let the wind, that soft wind, carry your thoughts far away. The Danakil is still there, watching, waiting. But for now, you're safe. You're still. You're home.